Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to BIA Kelsey Live. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're joined, as always, by Mike Boland, our senior analyst, our chief analyst, who's in San Francisco. I'm in Tacoma, Washington, and we're talking about local marketing and media. BIA Kelsey, of course, is a research firm that covers local media marketing and on-demand technologies, and we're going to be joined today by Daniel Shaked of Clip Call It. That is clipcall.it. For those of you tracking at home, and talking about his new product, which allows people to show an on-demand worker what they need done in their home before somebody shows up. And so in a short while, we'll be talking with Daniel, but we want to start with our usual news survey. But let me ask you, Mike, how was your week? What's going on in your world, and what do you think's interesting?
Well, the sun's finally shining in San Francisco. We've been having biblical weather over the last couple of weeks, so good to see the sun out.
Yeah, it's so nice you weren't washed away. We're getting past these things, these global warming changes. So let's start with the news. There's several pieces this week on the evolution of the local on-demand economy, which, of course, we've been doing shows and covering for several years, but we wanted to point to some interesting information that came out. First, there's a new version of Intuit's annual local on-demand survey. This is something they do surveys of about 6,500 workers in various on-demand markets, including Lyft, Mechanical Turk, Avo, and primarily professional services marketplaces. And they found that right now, today, 3.9 million people are working formally in the on-demand market. That would be people working in one of these two-sided marketplaces or through an intermediary who provides local on-demand fulfillment to deliver services and to do tasks, whether there's drive across town or deliver a package or fix a washing machine. And we think that's a fairly accurate number for a specific definition of people working in on-demand, but misses many of the informal type of labor that are being organized by many marketplaces today. They're projecting into it, that is, that 7.7 million people will be working formally in the on-demand economy in 2020. Now, that's in contrast to general findings that about 42% of Americans have part-time work today. And what's interesting about this is that within this particular group of survey respondents, they see on-demand work as sort of a stopgap between whether they don't make enough money in their regular job or in lieu of their regular job that they may have lost or being in transition between regular jobs, they're trying to supplement their income. So on average, the respondents worked about 11 hours a week on-demand and made about 24% of their income as a result of that. A couple other interesting data points that have come out in the last week as well is the Online Labor Index, which is a European study of all on-demand work around the globe, found that the U.S. accounts for 52% of on-demand projects listed in English-only marketplaces. So we're not talking about a Hindi on-demand site being counted in this global count. But of all the English jobs listed around the world, the United States accounts for 2.5 to 3 times as many as any other country in the world and is the clear leader. Finally, as a result of that, there's a number of initiatives to try to protect and provide a social safety net for these workers. The Pew Center this week pointed out a number of efforts, both public and private. So, for instance, here in Washington State, there is a bill to require on-demand marketplaces to contribute to a nonprofit pool of benefit resources that can be shared amongst on-demand workers. And on the private side, there's a growing company called Care.com, which provides a set of benefit services to on-demand workers by taking essentially 2 to 4% of every transaction and putting it into a pool that is used to provide benefits to workers who subscribe to the service. And generally, they do that through the marketplaces. So there's 3 big things. The on-demand economy is continuing to grow. It's growing messily. It's not well-defined who is currently on demand and who is not. And I think we're going to see further refinement of that. But Mike, when you look at all of these developments and we think about what we've talked about for the past 2 years now, where would you say we are in terms of adoption of on-demand as a work style, and what do you think the major issues we need to overcome still are?
So I'll start with the Intuit study. One of the things I took away from that is that it wasn't necessarily supportive of some of the like strength and appeal of on-demand
Right.
work, because in a lot of cases, 1 in 5 people are starting to do on-demand work because they've kind of fallen on financial hardship, as the report put it.
Right.
There are a few things like that really showed that for a lot of people, it's kind of like a plan B thing. It wasn't something they went into because it was attractive, but because they, need to pay their health insurance, or they just need to like pay their rent. And it's really something that you can kind of join a network quickly. That's one of the benefits of the on-demand economy, is that, though there is a kind of revenue share and there's a three-sided marketplace and all these things that kind of compress margins, the pay is not that great, as we've learned. Sure. One of the benefits is you can onboard rather quickly. So I think that, that's some of the appeal. And because of that, it's become this almost like fallback option for a lot of people. So, which is fine. But I think that doesn't really bode well for the health of the on-demand economy, because it's so kind of tied to or volatile because of shifts in kind of the employment market. But I think.
But do you see those shifts accelerating over the next few years? I mean, we're certainly at a time where regulatory relationships are going to change pretty dramatically, and we're looking for private solutions to many of these problems. Is this the kind of early stage challenge that every new mode of work encounters or it confronts at some point?
I'm not sure it really translates to all different kinds of work. Although it is, it's moving from, drivers and dry cleaning, as I like to say, up the market to, professional services. We see companies like Avo. I think they were actually one of the companies in the Intuit survey. And then, there's Heal, there's others. Heal, actually, I think they announced today they're going to go on more of a nationwide rollout. So I think as that happens, the model is going to apply to more kind of types of work. So I think its impact will be seen better, when it's just at that wider swath of the working public.
So the online labor index that I was talking about, the European effort, looked at all of the types of work being listed, and it's actually dominated by software development, creative and multimedia, writing and translation, and then you get into clerical and data entry, sales and marketing support, and other professional services. So in a lot of ways, I think these folks are counting from the top down, looking for formal conversion of regular jobs into on-demand work. But one of the other factors that we are going to see here, and we've seen it in home and household services, is the rise of what had been gray economy behavior, where nobody was taxed and nobody was counted, where homemakers are going to be hiring somebody through an on-demand service and maybe even trading services back to other people through the same service in order to add revenue for their household, or to try to build their own small business.
Yeah. Now, I think another important point here is that this is all like just fascinating stuff from a sociological perspective, from a regulatory perspective, the advancement of technology and society and all that. But I think it's important to ground that back into, what does that mean for like the BIA Kelsey audience that is in kind of local media, marketing, small business dynamics, all that good stuff. And one of the things that I keep looking at where the on-demand economy meets that discussion is that, so far we're talking about kind of 1099 workers and everything. And the question is, will that move up market where small businesses will use this as a new form of customer acquisition? Of course, the traditional form of customer acquisition is advertising. And that's what we spend a lot of time talking about. Will this replace advertising, where a small business, instead of an upfront marketing budget or a commitment to an ad budget, instead joins an on-demand network like an Uber driver would, and then is matched with demand in real time, and for that they pay, instead of, again, a marketing budget, they pay as they go through a revenue share. And I think it's an interesting
concept. I can certainly see that. The other thing I believe is going to happen is that the small business is going to start to add on-demand services, or rather use on-demand people to add new services locally. Too. So something could be delivered across town.
For their own employment, as you point out, absolutely. But also for their customer acquisition. I think that's interesting, because the implication is can on-demand chip into the 150 billion that is now spent on localized advertising? About 40% of that is SMBs, so it's a large sum of money. Roughly $50 million or 50 billion, excuse me, annually. Is that threatened by on-demand models? When SMBs use that as customer acquisition, and I think that's still a question that hasn't been answered. But I think that's an interesting concept.
And I spoke last week at the Power Court Summit in Florida, and I think one of the things that I heard coming from the executives who attended that is that they're starting to understand that local contact, local engagement through people who are expert in the use of their products, and this was primarily a household goods group of companies and tools around the house. They would like to have somebody in market who can represent them as the expert and provide service that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a retail location. Or the retail location is starting to sort of atomize and not be the place you go, but the place that your services come from in the community.
Yeah.
And that is going to be very interesting. I think talking to Daniel about that in a few minutes is going to add a lot to the picture.
Yep.
So let's move on to the other story we wanted to cover this week, and that has to do with the Internet of Things, or IoT, for those of you who just live in the acronym world. The Economist Internet of Things Business Index for 2017 came out, and their main question was, is this happening fast enough? What they found was that only 24% of the executives said that it was not happening fast enough, and 33% said that it was not happening fast enough, but they agreed less stridently. So essentially, 57% of the people they asked said IoT is not going quickly enough. On the other hand, we know that they said that 21% of these guys said that it's already having a major impact on their business. Now, we have done surveys of small business, and we found that very small businesses, what we call our core SMBs, are not spending very heavily. They've maybe put $50 to $80 into their entire spend on IoT over the last year, and those tend to be in beacons or something that is in store. On the other hand, our plus spenders, people who spend more than $25,000 a year on marketing, and they tend to spend a lot more than that, have put 3.7% of their budgets into IoT, which amounts to several $1,000s over the average. And these are in store, and they're also starting to invest in tools like Alexa or the Amazon Echo, maybe the other way you know it, that are devices in the home or tied to spoken word devices in the home to try to start to market better or to be prepared to accept a request from a customer based on signals from those devices. It could be a scale that says you started to gain weight, and therefore you get a recommendation through your Alexa that you should buy better food or something like that. That kind of integration, I think, is very, very immature, but we're starting to see real experimentation even amongst SMBs. So as you think about this, Mike, and the evolution of sensors that are telling the brands we work with as customers more about us, how are you thinking that we're going to see Internet of Things become a vital connection between small business or brands and the customer?
Sure. So I think that the form or the flavor of IoT that we're seeing most among small businesses likely beacons. And I think that, when we look at our survey, there's a vast difference between the plus spenders and the core sample, where the plus spenders' use or adoption of spending on IoT is so great. And I think that's simply because you see among the overall SMB universe, the retail establishments for whom beacons are relevant, are in that kind of mid-market plus spender area of the SMB world, where that kind of core sample includes, I think, a higher index of home services, plumbers.
Very, very small business, 1 to 2 people.
Very small business. So I think, IoT probably does not really apply to them. One, because they're lower spenders, they don't have a dedicated marketing person, they tend to be less savvy with these emerging technologies. But two, just the nature of their product, I'm not sure IoT really applies. I'm trying to wrap my brain around how a plumber might use IoT. besides maybe developing an Amazon Alexa skill that, informs a consumer and informs them and connects buyer and seller when there is a problem in the home. That could be the case.
I
But
think somebody needs to be in the interim organizing the signals,
yes, that's
right?
true.
So, and a place we can already see this happening is in farming. They're using
Farming.
sensors in the
Yeah.
fields to better understand what the yield is going to be, and then to project sales and where they're going to sell and how they're
Sure.
going to sell the quality, say, of a crop of grapes because it got the right amount of water versus too little or too much.
But I assume those deployments are in the like massive farms that aren't necessarily in our small business sample. But nonetheless, a good example of like,
I think you'd be surprised, but the point being that the small businesses who sell fruit and vegetables may also be tied into their suppliers much more deeply through a marketplace like this.
yeah. Well, I imagine that whoever is doing that are either a very small portion of early adopters, tech savvy SMBs and farmers, or the way it's going to scale and getting to them is with the kind of service providers who are vendors or advertisers or publishers in the space that are bringing them different flavors of operational and marketing and customer acquisition tools. So the lesson there, I think, is that might be an opportunity for that part of the value chain to start to differentiate by providing IoT-like solutions to the small business marketplace. Because I'm skeptical on their own kind of self-adoption, at least at that lower level.
Yeah, I tend to think that brands and product manufacturers are going to give these things in the form of APIs and maybe devices to small business to better rep them.
Yeah.
And that's where the initial wave of this is going to come from. But I do think we see some examples of it on a small scale, and really surprisingly, small farms are even starting to adopt this. So to my example, and I think this is, again, a matter of we're being surveilled, for lack of a better word, about our current situation and needs. And in the future, that's going to include whether we've got milk in the fridge, whether we've got enough detergent for the clothes, and there'll be a signal, a device in the bottle that says I'm almost empty, and will then through an Amazon Dash-like IoT device maybe place an order.
Well, the question
where
is,
today you have to explicitly press the button.
Yeah. And the question is whether you're pressing it or whether it's automatic and detecting what's in your fridge. It seems like Amazon's owning that. The question is, how can we get the corner store right down the street from me to get that ping when I'm out of milk and bring it to me?
Yeah, and I think that's a question that somebody competing with Amazon is going to come up with an answer to.
Yep.
So main thing I want to take away about this is that IoT is definitely growing, but it's growing unevenly and in a very strangely distributed fashion. There's a lot of concentration on a few key verticals right now, but it's going to broaden over the next 5 years. As that happens, there'll be a lot of opportunity for people to create that intermediary layer that takes data, processes it into something that makes an actionable moment happen for the marketer, and then presents that to the user. So it's going to be an interesting and I think slower than people would like transition, but we're in a very major transition that's going to involve so many different things changing about the way we market and we communicate with one another that this is par for the course. It's going to be a tough row to hoe. I think I just used like 7 stupid sports analogies right there, but I think it would be great now to turn to Daniel and talk with him now. So, Mike, go ahead.
Sure, Daniel. Good to have you. How are you? Daniel Shocker from Clip Call.
Hi, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Sure. So
fascinating discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're going to tie right into everything we've been talking about. So I'll tee this up for you quickly, and then we'll go into some questions about what you're doing. So as kind of introduction for our audience, Clip Call is a very interesting kind of marketplace app where it's a two-sided app. And two-sided, what I mean by that is, of course, it's service provider facing and then also user facing. And it has different kind of feature sets in each of those that we're going to go into, but really the kind of core value proposition is that it brings multimedia into the picture to connect buyer and seller, to qualify a service need. We talked a lot about home services earlier. That's a very popular use case in which it's applied. So, for example, if you have a service need, your basement is flooded, to be able to capture that with multimedia, which has a few different advantages. In one, again, being able to kind of qualify the need so the service provider kind of knows what tools to bring, what to charge, and all that good stuff, but also to kind of gauge the level of, stage and intent and seriousness of the consumer through kind of capturing their everything from their tone of voice to what the problem looks like. And this also ties very much into the trend of conversational commerce. Millennials and several others are very comfortable with these kind of messaging interfaces to qualify a business decision, to put buyer and seller together, taking place of some of the previous methods, which were Google search or perhaps a phone call, with a more robust multimedia-rich environment in which that can happen. So Daniel, with that backdrop, tell us a little bit about yourself and then go into any parts I missed or how you like to kind of explain the company to others.
No, you did it pretty well. Actually, look, I'm in the business of helping small, medium businesses and connecting them with ready-to-hire customers for over a decade. I don't know why, but that's my passion. The previous company is still operating, but was a very unique pay-per-call solution with real-time bidding based on some voice preview of the customer need. Right now, Clip Call aims to provide a much better and richer experience, great experience in zero-trusted market for both sides. And you were right about the both side app. I think, first, I believe that we as a company evolved from I would say media play, lead gen play, towards an on-demand space, marketplace space. And I do think, to relate to your previous discussion, that yes, the on-demand space is going to bite, some bite, very serious bite from those advertising budgets. We see the service providers are using the apps like ours to acquire customers. And that's a less risk-free or less freer model for them instead of paying just for ads, clicks, leads, and things like that. So look, I think it's all about communication. It's a better communication. It's a huge market with practically zero trust between customers and service professionals, simply because customers don't know what are the prices there. They have zero skills about trying to evaluate what kind of spend they should be spending for whatever project. And then they have a random guy call them or appear at their door and pricing them with whatever. And this is what creates a lot of distrust in that space. So we have taken a different approach. We have developed a messenger which allows both sides to communicate. That's what people do. A better way to describe what you need, and we believe that video is the best way to describe what you need. We are doing video right now. We are seeing reactions, emotions. We're seeing each other. And yes, there is an entire additional layer of information that comes up with the request itself. It's the tone of the voice. It's how committed the customer sounds. Is he in a research mode, search mode, or ready to hire? What do we see at the background? I see a lot of books at the background there, and I see different things in your background, and I have a perception of you as a person. So it's a lot of information that comes in addition to that, to the request itself, which makes it a much richer experience. And then we allow simply the people to discuss the project. And I would say that one of the main challenges which causes trust issues in that space is the fact that people today have no mean of communication to get a fixed flat rate price for their custom project. So they have to hire. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, one of the things I really liked about Clip Call was that it is the entire cycle, too. It's not just the discovery, but you do the transaction. Does that mean you can also start to collect pricing generally and help people figure out what's fair?
That's right. So the first stage, of course, is to describe the project and then get interested service professionals to quote you a fixed price instead of a moving target price or by hour, where no one can renovate their house or renovate their kitchen by hour. So, yeah, and then we manage the entire transaction, starting from a booking. The booking of the service through our app is just the beginning of the project. So you were talking about the IoT. I think that, the basic form of IoT is the cell phone in the pocket,
Mm-hmm.
which practically we gather a lot of information about the experience. So if a service professional schedules a house visit with you in order to quote or to start a job, we know when he hits your location because we have location tracking on. That's part of the quality of service that we offer. And we know if this guy is late or if this guy has a no-show for whatever reason. And if there is a late arrival, so we do compensate the customer for that, taking some fee from the service professional who accepts that kind of a process. And this way we are trying, to address the major problems in hiring and corresponding with service professionals for customers and for the other side as well, by the way. So the tracking of location, if people are late, if people are stretching the quotes, is a very important part of the information that we gather. And I would say that the most interesting piece of data that we are able to generate right now is that every video that a customer uploads to our system, we tag that video with, of course, the information like length and which trade it is and when and where it was taken, but we also tag the video with every keyword that was spoken. And then we have booked services there. So we start to understand what keywords correlate with what price. And more than that, if the service professional was not booked, we see which quote was booked above or below. So we start to profile the service pro and understand if this is a pricey guy or cheaper guy, kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So next, going forward, we are able to better match customers with service professionals, not only based on trade and location, but also for the right project.
So Daniel,
So
and
trade, location, and project.
That gets into your quality score and lots of other cool things I want to get into. But taking a step back, walk us through the actual the flow of the consumer experience. So they upload, they indicate a need. They upload the media. They tell what they want. What happens then? That fans out, I know, to several of the different service providers in your network. Tell us about what the matching algorithm looks like, how they further qualify it, and then where the quality score comes in, because everything you just alluded to is, I know you have a quality score that has all kinds of different metrics, including if they're on time, if their quote was accurate, all that kind of good stuff. So unpack the matching algorithm a bit for us and how that works.
Okay, so first it starts with creating a very meaningful and structured video.
Yep.
So we invest a lot in educating the customers by injecting a layer of information on their video while they're shooting that video of their need to make sure that they address the right things and show the right things. All that is needed for us to tag the video with the right pieces of information that was said and provided. So it starts with aggregating the information. Every transaction creates a better matching algorithm, but practically, it's not only that you are looking for a plumber in San Francisco. It's like, what other keywords? Are you saying a trash collector? Are you using other search terms? And we start to understand it's not only just a plumbing issue. It's a trash collector fixing plumbing issue.
So you may know more than the customer or the user knows themselves about what their needs. You may know more than them.
Yeah, and all that, we need to match not only a plumber with that thing, we want to match the best plumber that provided the most bookings for fixing the trash collector, going backwards. So it's a kind of a prediction model, which evolves with each and every transaction. We become smarter and smarter. But yes, we tag the videos. The videos are structured and well done by customers, and that we invest a lot in order for that to happen with guiding the people. And then we dispatch that lead or that job. It is streamed live practically to our network of service professionals who are registered, covering that trade in that area. When they watch that video, not everyone gets it. And that's the quality score part. The quality score is generated based on lots of parameters. One of them, the most important one, is the booking rate that each and every service professional has generated so far. So it's how many quotes he provided so far versus how many times he was booked.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a very strong parameter, and it impacts the quality score a lot. So those with a higher quality score get more jobs, but the right jobs.
And where are you sourcing your qualified professionals? How are you attracting them? Because that, of course, is the other major challenge for a two-sided marketplace.
Network effect.
Right. So we were building the product with the service professional in mind.
Mm-hmm.
We understand that each and every person that decides to start a small business, he really wants to be successful. He doesn't want to perform a lousy service or be a scammer, but they have a very tough time managing their business.
Right.
They 80% of their time is dealing with logistics and not with plumbing or roofing problems. So we've built them not only a best quality leads that are coming in from the best or the most committed customers, but also we've built a system that helps them to convert those leads into actual revenues. So on their side of the app, they have a quasi CRM system, which filters the business opportunities, and our chatbot constantly talks to them and motivates them to follow up on open quotes, reminds them. It's like a personal secretary, like a sales guy.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a customer who addressed them with a question mark, and there was no response on their side, we will remind the service professional to answer the customer. All that to make them much more successful. So all those two parts, great leads and a system that helps them, a software that helps them generate revenues, is free.
So Daniel,
how hard would it be to attract service professionals?
Daniel,
so you say it's free, but do they pay some percentage of the completed job?
Yes, they pay. Right now we collect 10%, but it's only when they make money. So attracting them to that platform right now it's relatively easy. At this point, we have more supply than demand.
So what you're saying is, too, you're helping them get the optimum price, and that's another component of the attraction or the pitch to the service provider.
That's correct. And this is, again, one of the reasons that I think that on-demand platforms will bite into advertising budgets, simply because we allow them to have an efficiency tool to work with their other clients using our tool as well, which is part of our user acquisition strategy. So giving them a software that makes their life easier, not just drive them leads, which they cannot convert really,
right,
but also help them to convert those leads, will eventually, what it causes is for them to use this as their operating system and to onboard their other clients from other sources of advertising that they have. So that's the idea in a whole.
Daniel, that's great. I was going to ask about the business model, but you already answered that question. It's 10% of the transaction. That comes from the service provider's end?
It comes from the service provider side. Yeah, we collect the money upon the booking, and the booking happens for future service, like if you book Airbnb or hotels. We take the money from the customer account and we escrow that amount of money until it gets thumbs up from both sides that the job was performed and the customer is happy. And then we transfer 90% at this point to the service professional. But when they registered, have signed for 20% commission. It's just a promotion that we're currently allowing, which is 50% off our standard. But if you are thinking about that, in every on-demand or marketplace app or company, the supply side is usually paying 20-25%. If it's Uber driver or Airbnb host or Fiverr person that performs a service, usually that's what is taken. We've taken a less aggressive approach while penetrating the market. I don't think that we are going to raise the prices at this point because unit economics make sense right now. Another option that we started to offer, and that's an interesting approach, I believe, is for customers to subscribe to like a Prime account. It's a subscription-based model for house owners. And constantly for those customers who subscribe to our services, they get the 10% that we used to take from the service professional, they get it back. So it's like 10% cash back, and we're seeing huge adaptation of that business model right now, having customers to subscribe and get discounts, ability to finance their projects, and of course, tons of other different things that house owners need, like preventive maintenance and emergency services at discounted price.
Interesting.
Interesting. So you're financializing this transaction.
Something that a service professional cannot do. We offer for someone who has right now $1,000 job to pay only $100 spread over 10 months. But they have to be subscribers.
Yep. That's an interesting new level of service on top of what you're doing on a one-off basis. So we're winding down on time here. Daniel, what would you like to communicate to our audience in terms of where you are now, your current needs or pain points that might represent, the fact that you are looking for partners in X, Y, and Z area, or investors, or the product growth itself? Mitch characterized it earlier as kind of a holistic end-to-end solution. I know that you're doing billing. There's that lock-in effect that you want to achieve with just a broader solution. Where are you going next product-wise, and then also growth and operationally that might represent openings for our listeners to contact you for any kind of possible synergies?
Right. So look, as a young startup, we're just a year old right now. And I haven't mentioned, but our R&D is in Israel. The HQ is in the San Francisco Bay Area. But our main goal right now as a company is to expand beyond the 4 metros that we're currently operating: New York, New Jersey, LA, and San Francisco Bay Area. And for that, we are about to start a Series A funding roadshow very soon. So, of course, we're looking for investors, but I'm mainly interested in, of course, better strategic investors, people who are passionate about local, who understand local. Not every financial investor really understands what's going on there. So that's our preference, of course. The second thing, we are looking to get to as many households as possible. And for that, we're looking, of course, for any strategic partnership that can expose us to the house owner. There are a few ideas how to achieve that, and we are working right now with various untraditional or not traditional industries to our space, like insurance companies and property management companies, things like that, who are interested in the software the way it is right now in order to process claims of the house owners and many other cool things. If you think a kind of a messenger that helps both sides to communicate is applicable for lots of industries.
Do you see white labeling the service for other industries so that a brand could use it, for instance?
That might be an option, but it has to be in a way synergetic to our purpose of building this marketplace and growing it. We are now focused on verticals which are in or around the house mainly, which are like 40 different verticals. But we see people facing the camera and telling us unbelievable stories about their need for family legal issues, and they would tell a story. Business legal issue, like lawyers, is a very interesting vertical where people are really doing video blogs, telling their story and looking for lawyers.
Yeah, and they're also looking to see how the lawyer responds because they don't want somebody who doesn't feel comfortable with them. So yes, we've seen that too.
Exactly.
Well, Daniel, this is fascinating, and we have unfortunately run out of time today. But I'd love to have you back and talk more about this. So, folks, thanks for your attention at BIA Kelsey Live. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. That's Mike Boland and Daniel Chiquette, our guest today from Clip Call as well. Thanks for your attention. Look for the video version of this online at biakelsey.com starting tomorrow. And we look forward to talking to you next week on Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Thanks, everybody, for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you.